Hi, this is Voluntary Visions, and I'm Marcus Pulis. Today I'm going to talk a little bit upbeat. Isn't really so much of a subject, but it does include a lot of quotes from a lot of freedom fighters that have come before and also that are currently alive today. But sometimes it's good to talk about freedom in positive terms, and this is an article I wrote some time ago that does just that. It's called Freedom is Our Future. Freedom is our future. It is the natural evolution of human society. This can be seen in the simple study of history. 5,000 years ago, human leadership was decided by who was able to demonstrate their leadership physically. This usually was decided at the end of a really big stick. 300 years ago, most of the world was ruled by one or another monarchy. No one really thought that the divine right of kings would ever be questioned, let alone replaced. 100 years ago, people were trying out different forms of republics and representative governments, which had been shown to be successful largely by places like the United States. We continue to move towards a more localized, voluntary society. Large groups of anarchists gather to discuss the world without government. Libertarian ideas are on the rise, while the approval numbers of government across the world plummet. This is a quote from Adam Kokesh, who is running for the presidential nomination for the Libertarian Party, the third largest party in the United States. The current global paradigm of social organization is statism. Statism is based on a central authority ruled by force and subservience to the collective or ruling class. It is coming to an end as we wake up to a new freedom paradigm based on human rights, nonviolence, and self-ownership. This transition from the paradigm of statism to the paradigm of freedom is the most important paradigm shift in human history. So what is all this new paradigm? Ron Paul defines liberty this way. Quote, liberty means to exercise human rights in any manner a person chooses, so long as it does not interfere with the exercise of the rights of others. End quote. He continues by saying that one of the best ways to ensure liberty is to keep government out of our lives. Liberty, he demonstrates, is the way we can unleash our energies that build civilizations, give security, and create wealth. He finishes by saying only liberty can ward off tyranny. Our first step must be to bring our government back into the founding principles, not necessarily to the ideas of a government, but to the principles that founded this country, such as self-ownership, such as natural rights, like John Locke would have talked about. We must correct the wrongs that our government has inflicted. The goal should be to recapture our sense of the individual. Step one of this process might be localization. The head of this beast, that is centralized control, in some way must be cut off. That is why it is important that we peacefully dissolve the federal government within this country. Those who fear this evolution contend that a national government gives us equal protection. We all know this is false. Glenn Beck explains that one of the mistakes our government is making is that they are confusing equality of opportunity with equality of outcome. Equality of outcome, he shows, is impossible. An example of this impossibility is if you compare the outcome of crops from a hard-working farmer to the lazy farmer. The hard-working farmer, naturally, will be more likely to have more of an outcome of crops than the lazy one. He goes on to quote Aristotle and says, quote, the worst form of inequality is to try to make unequal things equal. Glenn Beck, again, in Arguing with Idiots, argues that freedom cannot provide things such as a job or a better life. He goes on to say what it can do is provide the environment where you have a better chance to succeed and achieve your dreams. Beck, who I don't always agree with, but in this case I do, he asserts that when people say that the free market capitalism has failed, he answers that capitalism hasn't failed. Greed. Yeah, greed has failed. Those aren't the same word. There are many signs that we are moving in the right direction. First, there is the success of Ron Paul, and also the growing success of people like Adam Kokesh. Ron Paul has been so successful that I find it amusing that other candidates are being forced to start trying to sound like Ron Paul. Even Bernie Sanders did everything he could to appear like Ron Paul. Sanders went as far as stealing some of his imagery. It would be better if Sanders and a whole host of other politicians actually changed their minds and now supported freedom. Andrew Napolitano asserts that a step that was taken to help restore the freedoms American citizens are guaranteed in the Constitution of Association, were of association, assembly, and private property. That was covered within the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which overturned the Jim Crow laws that prevented these rights from being applied to African Americans. All rights must be spread to every person. They must be universal. There is not one person who has more rights than any other person. It's one of the fallacies that government uses constantly. The act, being the Civil Rights Act of 1964, was definitely a step in the right direction. It gave more people those rights. Not that it actually gave it to them, it just stopped the government from inhibiting them to have the rights that they were born with. Because each man is born free. We own ourselves, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is, what sexual orientation you have, or what gender you are. We all have the same rights. There are not rights that are guaranteed to one group or another group. There are human rights. And when somebody else, let's say a squirrel, decides that they need equal rights too, and they can petition to their community to have it, they should get the opportunity as well. So that's the argument that I make, why animals don't have the same right or plants don't have the same right. The moment they can communicate with us, then I say we offer them the same rights because they have demonstrated their ability to communicate and to self-ownership. Now, does that define them as human? I don't know. But it does mean that they are sentient and that they have a cognizance of their rights. And therefore, they should be given those rights because that's the natural way of things. In Congress, and also with many of the presidential candidates, a promising movement is happening towards a better understanding of the 10th Amendment. It states that the power, quote, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or the people. By going back to this amendment, we would remove some of the centralized power of Washington, D.C. and put it back in the hands of the people. Unfortunately, this isn't enough. We have overstepped the Constitution on so many occasions. The argument that it's going to restrain anything has been proven absolutely not true. Our government repeatedly ignores the Constitution. It was a good example of how monarchism, though a good idea at the time, is past its time. It is time to move to real freedom because tyranny is around us. Now, does that mean that the monarchist friends of mine that are around are my enemy? No, not at all. In fact, they're my ally. When we get this behemoth that is the United States government down to a workable monarchist society, then let's have that conversation. I'm going to disagree. I believe that the only ethical way to have a government is if it's voluntary. And I think if we get to local governments, we get there. But that's an argument for a different day. The argument for today is let's get everything else down. Let's work together. Let's get monarchists and anarchists, voluntarists, whatever you want to call yourself, together and move towards that smaller government. Work together. And once we get to that smaller government, and by small I don't mean size, I'm talking about less controlling government. When we get to that less controlling tyrannical government, then we can have this conversation and figure out if the monarchists are right or if the anarchists are right. Not the time for it now. All of these steps towards individual liberty were discussed by John Locke, who had a huge influence on the founding fathers of this country. According to Locke's philosophy, the only reason for government is the protection and preservation of individuals' natural rights. John Locke is right about many things, but the thought that any government would protect the individuals has been proven false time and time again. Again, by Adam Kokesh, quote, statism is the ideology of turning to organized force to solve problems better solved through peaceful persuasion. No government can solve these problems. Most of the time they cause them. As I said, we are beginning to wake up as a nation from the slumber we have been in for around 100 years. When we do, the next 200 years will be better than the 400 years before it. That time is quickly approaching. We must remind the people that, quote, to love liberty requires an act of intellect. It involves coming to understand how all of the things we love in this world were given to us under conditions of liberty. Ron Paul. The need to stay awake will still be with us. To quote Thomas Jefferson, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Again, Kokesh weighs in with this advice. Given that it is our destiny to achieve a voluntary society, there are only two ways statism can end: a violent collapse or a peaceful transition. Current government systems are clearly unsustainable. If we do not start paying attention and facing up to our problems, we are headed for a sudden failure of the very system that many of us depend on. End quote. We must return to those natural rights that protect our freedoms, and our first step to eliminate the tyranny in our midst. This will not be easy, because it means we must stand up in the face of the possibility of an enemy that simply wants to destroy each individual. Quote, for the paradigm shift to occur, it has to be embraced by a critical mass of people. We are rapidly approaching the tipping point at which statism will be untenable, not just because the institutions are unsustainable, but because we are rising up and demanding our rights. Adam Kokesh. Let us give up our longing for welfare, our love of war, and our desire to see government shape our fellow citizen. Let us understand that it is far better to live in an imperfect world than it is to live in a despotic world ruled by people who lord it over us through force and intimidation. Ron Paul. This is going to be a little bit of a different kind of quote, but I think it's apt. Aleister Crowley says in his introduction to the Book of the Law, quote, liberty stirs once more in the womb of time. He believed, as I do, that we, the people, will answer the call of freedom. Not only does this path towards freedom give us the liberty to live our lives as we choose, it also provides us with the opportunity to, as Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence, pursue happiness. The way most of us understand freedom and happiness is backwards. Happiness is not the result of freedom. Happiness causes freedom. Do we need freedom to be happy? Most certainly not. Happiness is not pursued, captured, and beaten over the head with a club and hauled home to be enjoyed forever and ever. Adam Kokesh. In the way we finally look back on the nameless primitive who first made fire and invented the wheel, someday people will look back, perhaps from another planet, at the fortunate generation that wielded the internet and defeated government. Adam Kokesh. Freedom is our future, and the time to embrace it is now. We deserve self-rule. We deserve to be in charge of our own lives. No one has the right to control others by force, even if they claim to have the majority behind them. Again, Adam Kokesh. In closing, I believe Ron Paul captures the spirit I am writing here when he said, quote, we must come to imagine liberty again and believe that it can be a reality. In order to do this, we do not need songs, slogans, rallies, programs, or even a political party. All we need is access to good ideas, some degree of idealism, and courage to embrace the liberty that so many great people of the past have embraced. When the ideas turn and the culture again celebrates what it means to be free, our battle will be won. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and if you're watching this on BitChute, hit that little green button. Give me a little bit of money. I want to improve my production. I am continuing to try to deliver better content and spread the word. You own yourself. Thank you very much.